Hey there everyone, I'm Lord Farquaad, and this is Dev Talk number 7 about Galaxar. Galaxar was based on a game called Warframe, which you can find on Steam. In Warframe, you basically choose a character that already has preset abilities, but you can choose what weapons and modifications that you put on them. You can then enter the navigation system and choose a planet and choose a mission on that planet. And there are different types of missions, such as extermination, spy, survival, and a few more. These missions pit you against a slew of AI where you have some central goal to accomplish. For example, in extermination, you have to kill everyone. You can also party up with friends to play missions together. Work on this server started in summer of 2016, a few months after the close of Fallen Civilization. I started alone, but convinced Dev34 to join me, even though development was in very early stages. Dev34 was working on experimentation with AI, and we were also experimenting on creating animated robots like those seen in Warframe. We had both put a few dozen hours into Warframe, so we knew what we wanted to create in Just Cause 2 multiplayer. Inspiration from Galaxar also stemmed from the space update we were working on for Fallen Civilization, an update that never made it to release. We also worked on some interesting Minecraft-esque block spawning in this period of time, but they were too laggy for any real use. Instead of warframes, as they were called in Warframe, that people could use, we called them battle suits. You equip a certain battle suit and you had access to the abilities of that specific suit. We only had 2 battle suits at first, the Brute and the Flamezor. The Brute was meant to be a big tank that could soak and deal a lot of damage. His first ability was one where he crouches down and then speeds forward and deals massive damage to whatever he collides with. His second ability was one where he jumps in the air and then comes down and deals damage in a large area of effect. His third ability just increases his overall damage dealt for a little while. His fourth ability summons a huge sword that deals massive damage. Each ability would have cost a certain amount of energy, and energy would be restored by collecting energy crystals throughout the mission. The second battle suit was Flamezor. Flamezor's first ability throws a fireball that explodes on contact. His second ability allows him to place a flame trap on the ground that explodes when enemies walk over it. His third ability transforms him into a living flame, allowing him to fly around and not take any damage. This ability would have been great for repositioning or getting to high vantage points. His fourth ability requires an entity to use, so we can't see it right now. If there was an entity, then after delay, a huge meteor would shoot from the sky and explode on the entity, dealing massive damage. The fourth ability of any battlesuit was meant to be the most powerful, and thus it would require the most energy to use. The first thing that I worked on for Galaxar was a custom movement system. The movement system in Warframe is really smooth and you can cover a lot of ground quickly, so I wanted to have something close to that. After a little while, I had most of the movement done. Double jumping, double tap shift to roll, hit control while moving to slide, faster sprint, higher jump, and of course the air roll where you jump while sliding. After doing this, I called Dev34 over to my test server, and he guessed what I was working on right away, so we discussed plans and he wanted to work on the AI for it. We also created a document to write down all our plans, as seen here. I started experimenting with different rendering techniques during Galaxar, and this was actually a lot of fun. The earlier rendering stuff included stars that weren't intensive on people's computers, as well as the planets for the navigation system. Originally, the planets were a bunch of circles rendered in 3D space, but that caused frame drops, so I created spherical models, and that made it much better. The text for most of the Galaxar stuff, such as the loading title and planet names, was actually created on accident. I wanted to have a shadow behind the text with 50% transparency, but I accidentally rendered it on top of the text. I looked at it, and actually thought it was pretty cool, so I stuck with it. The mission complete and mission failed graphic was also done completely in Just Cause 2 multiplayer, without any external images or anything, so I was pretty happy with those. I also worked on custom edge fade things, little vignettes that appear in different colors. An example of this in the base game is when you take damage and you see the red on the edges of the screen. I wanted to create this effect without any external images in the game so I could manipulate the color as I wanted. It would flash blue when you were hit and your shield was still up. The end result wasn't too bad, but it still had some minor issues that I would have to look into. I also discovered how to make streaks while doing this too, and that was really exciting. This is the first video I took of the streaks right after I got them working, and I was pumped. Eventually, I also started working on some HUD for Galaxar. Some of the first renditions of HUD simply copied Warframe, but I didn't like them too much, so I started working on different circle-based designs, which I thought were pretty cool. For a lot of the HUD, such as the press X to use navigation and the loot indicators, I wanted a very simple look, and I think those turned out well. I also made a really neat loading screen using some elements from the Mission Complete graphic as well as puzzles, which will be discussed later. I also experimented with some Star Trek-esque effects as well, but they were a little bit too laggy to use. Another interesting render-related script was a recall script I made. This would create a long streak behind the player as they moved around, and then when they pressed a key, they would fly backwards in time along that line. This was going to be worked into a battle suit at some point so that the player could escape from hostile situations and recover health. I was really excited when I got it working well. So in Galaxar, every player starts in their own spaceship, which contains the navigation system and would have eventually expanded to contain more modules such as the shop, crafting area, and customization area. The nav area shows all of the planets and all of the missions on each of those planets. I wrote a really neat queuing system for this so that players can see everyone else who's queuing for the same mission, so that players can coordinate and queue together and make missions easier and have more fun. Once a player enters the queue, they can accept, which will start the mission if they are alone, or start a countdown if there are more players in the queue, and once everyone in the queue is accepted, then the mission will start with everyone. Different missions would be unlocked after completing easier missions, and each would have a recommended difficulty level. There was a planned loot system for Galaxar. The loot system would have been much simpler than Fallen Civilization, though. In missions, you could obtain loot in 3 different ways, from opening containers, from killing enemies, and from just completing the mission. Enemies would drop various smaller loot things such as crafting components like scrap metal. They would also drop energy, which is required to use abilities. Once a container is opened, the player receives a random amount of credits. More valuable stuff would generally be found in containers. To pick up an item, the player would just have to walk over it. The inventory of the player would be infinite, and items would stack forever, so it's a lot different than that of Fallen Civilization. The items that the player gets after completing the mission would be the most valuable of all the items that they get. These are usually blueprints for new battle suits or weapon blueprints, or modifications for battle suits and weapons. I worked on a few different camera related things for Galaxar as well. The first of which was the default camera for players. I redid the old camera and created a new one which was slightly closer to mimic the closer camera that is present in Warframe. I also wanted to eventually have cutscenes for a lot of things. This is one test cutscene of the spaceship flying off to a planet for a mission. This would have been shown after the mission starts, after the queue finishes. There was also a pretty neat tutorial I made for Galaxar that explained the new movement system. The different rendering things I did makes it look like a simulation that was created to teach the movement. I think that it's much better than reading a ton of text like at Newbie Island in Fallen Civilization. So maybe I'm improving on creating new player experiences. I don't know. I also worked on a custom chat for Galaxar because I thought it would be great to have chat channels. One for general talk, one for talk about missions, one for trading, and one where you can create private chat rooms. It was pretty difficult to create this chat, and I had a lot of different and interesting techniques to stop it from dropping frames from people. It still has a lot of issues with different multi-line messages overlapping each other sometimes, but it's still fairly functional, and I think it looks alright. Some missions would have included puzzles to stop security systems or hack into other things. I tried to create one of the puzzles that Warframe used for these, and it nearly worked. It has a lot of issues when pieces with more ends are added, but it works pretty well with just a few pieces. Now, during this time, Dev34 was doing a lot of experimentation with AI in a few different ways. He started using advanced pathfinding algorithms to make AI take smart paths and evade obstacles when running towards people, instead of running just directly at them and hit everything. Some of this AI did make it into another project, however, so there might be a video on that sometime. Development stopped because Just Cause 3 Multiplayer's public beta release was right around the corner, so we were both very excited to start developing for that. Galaxar would have been pretty awesome, but it also would have been a lot of work. It still would have been less work than Fallen Civilization maintenance, but a lot of cool stuff came out of Galaxar even though it never saw the light of day. However, if you're still looking for a Just Cause 2 multiplayer experience where you are pitted against AI in a cooperative setting, check out Jaxm's Panau Online server. A link will be in the description so you can check that out.